Like many of the games I've played for videos, most of the time it's a title I've heard of over the years but never looked much further into it, meaning that the video is all based on my experience with the game at the time of playing. In this case it's 2024, meaning that the game I'll be talking about today is over 11 years old, which blew me away when I knew about that after seeing the gameplay. I'll of course go into, more detail later, but because I'd only heard pretty much the title of the game and that's it, I didn't know how old it actually was. And from the look of the game, I'd believe you if you said it only launched a couple years ago. Of course, I'm talking about Warframe. If you don't know what it is, or only know a little bit, like me beforehand, it's actually a free-to-play title. That's right, the first free-to-play game that I've done a review on the channel. So that already makes it much more accessible for anyone that is, thinking about playing it but isn't entirely sure yet. It means one major step's out of the way, that being you don't have to spend a penny. But is it worth your time, and is it your sort of game? Which is what I'll be covering like always. It's also a multiplayer game that even has cross-platform, meaning you can play with friends and players on other platforms, which is perfect. And another area that doesn't limit people playing, like the price tag. Saying that though, this review will primarily focus on a solo experience, as the game has a great running story through it all, which I'll speak on in a bit, and whilst following through the story, the core gameplay is third-person shooting, with a mixture of RPG and stealth elements. But to sort of label it, it's basically an online action game, and let me tell you, it's a lot of fun. In terms of, first impressions on a game I've done a video on in the past year or so, this is definitely up there. I was pleasantly surprised and, it gripped me straight away. The gameplay is full of action and so fast paced as soon as you jump in, whilst obviously you being able to build up your character as you progress, and the game being updated over time. But if we're just talking about the start of games, I had so much fun with this one. So I think it makes sense to focus on gameplay first, which, as I mentioned, follows this looter-shooter gameplay a bit like as for say Borderlands, which is similar in the sense that it uses, fast-paced movement and gunplay, looting mechanics, and the gameplay upgrades over time. So in late game, for example, it's the craziest it's ever been. It's all set in the future and in space, meaning there's very futuristic elements to it which allows for a lot of fun. A core aspect being the warframes themselves, which are biomechanical suits used by your character, so it's not just a wide selection of guns they can use but also various abilities. When you start the game you get to choose between 3 warframes, Excalibur, Mag and Volt, all different in their own way, with their own core elements, such as Excalibur being all about swordsmanship and martial combat, and then Mag is about using magnetic force to your advantage, and lastly Volt uses electricity to shock enemies. And as you progress through the game you can modify your warframe even more, so you can fit your playstyle or simply experiment with it. In terms of the base warframe, I chose Excalibur, as it's just what I thought sounded the most fun, which is what you should really base it off, just whichever one you think sounds best for you, as there's no clear right answer, because you'll be upgrading significantly as you go. So that's what I would say is the most unique feature of this gameplay, but then combine that with the usual build up of your loadout. For an example, the massive selection of weapons you can equip along with the rest of your gear. You can buy these weapons with the credits you earn from simply playing the game, mainly by completing missions. This could be story or side missions, whatever. In fact, the leveling system is fairly generous, especially in the weapons, which also have their own levels the more you get kills with them. The market is where all the weapons are sold, along with the blueprints for weapons, melees, consumables. The blueprints do require more than just credits, usually a set of materials found from looting the world, but of course some are locked if you haven't completed certain missions, especially the junction ones. I'll talk more about the story later, but the mission design follows the star chart, which involves several planets that you progress through one by one, linking in to the narrative, and as you play, you'll explore a completely new area of the world, or space I should say. Basically, once you finish one planet's junction, which is what moves you on to the next one, then you'll have unlocked a selection of weapons and a new quest. Basically, the more you play through the game's main campaign, the more items you'll gain and the better your loadout will be, rather than a traditional looter shooter which involves physically looting areas around the map. And not to say that isn't in this game, as they are. It's what sort of makes it a looter shooter in a way. But as I mentioned at the start, I describe it more as just an online action game. The loot chests are opened just by breaking with a quick melee or a gunshot, so it fits in with that high speed movement of the game for sure. And you don't have to, hold and search, which would be so annoying as they're pretty much everywhere. Also, the loot automatically picks up because as I said, you don't get weapons from doing this. It's only ammo, materials, consumables, etc. So there's no need for you to decide what to pick up or not and spend ages sorting through it all. But the variety is insane from the types of weapons and the appearances, meaning you can always switch the feeling of your gameplay, either by choosing a different weapon or an ability or your entire Warframe. And the overall unlocking of the weapons should keep you quite occupied for a long time and just adds on to that replayability for sure. And what's great as well is that it's fun straight off the back with minimal gear, so it doesn't feel slow for the new player, as I've kept on expressing. Also, the modding system is even bigger and you can spend a long time upgrading your weapons. It's fairly straightforward for the most part in terms of actually equipping mods, as they're just cards that can be slotted in and out, some increasing base or critical damage, firing modes, speed, reload and range, etc. Another area of the gameplay is the companions. That's right, they could be animals or robots that stay by your side if you do equip them, and can also be upgraded as well, and they're there to sort of help fight enemies off with their own abilities and different fighting styles and weapons, with only one being equipped at a time. Now, a great part of Warframe, and one of the main reasons why it has such a big and active community after all these years, is the fact that it's still receiving many updates. So of course there's the usual bug fixes and patches, as we know, which is quite needed as the game is always becoming older and prone to bugs that could stay there for ages if the game isn't updated. So the performance is still consistent, but also brand new content with bigger updates. There's usually one massive one every year that expands the story with a major quest, as well as various changes to weapons and gameplay, buffing and nerfing areas, which always switches up the gunplay and can make players readjust to a different loadout that feels different, so it's new, whether that be for the better or the worse. In other words, it keeps people coming back or staying. Usually when the game goes quiet, you can sort of guarantee there's a new update coming soon, as there's still smaller content updates throughout the year. I just think it's great that they're still keeping on top of the game after over a decade, and this is why there's still a massive community with returning players and new ones as well. The company actually care about the game. And the next really big update for this year is 1999, which is a giant expansion for sometime this year that adds on to the narrative even more, and it has promised to take players back to the start of the game with more classic parts of the gameplay, so we'll see what that is. One thing I will mention is the visuals of the game, which was a massive factor into why I was so surprised when I heard the game was this old, as the look of the game is incredible, from the lighting to the effects and colour. I was just blown away. I mean, to be honest, it looks better than some recent titles that have come out. It keeps you immersed into the gameplay, and as I said earlier, you can always explore new places of the map that also look great because of how well the graphics are. And that's where I end my review of Warframe in 2024. I had so much fun playing this game and will carry on playing it for a while, especially with them still pushing out updates, of course. I just love how fast paced the game is and the action to it. I would definitely recommend in 2024. I didn't think I'd enjoy it as much as I did, and I urge you to check it out even if you're thinking about it a bit, because I'm sure you'll have a lot of fun. And it's free as well, which is great. If you did enjoy this video, then let me know by tapping that like button down below. And if you like single player games, then that's what this channel mainly focuses on, but there's a few that have multiplayer to them as well. I have many reviews on various games, and there's a playlist of a series I've done in the description. Also, if you'd like to support the channel by becoming a member at either level 1 or 2 to gain access to many perks, then tap the join button below, or there'll also be a link in the description. Thank you all for the support and watching until the very end. I think my next video will be a different one, and you'll see what I mean by that. And that was Warframe, and bye bye.